my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today I'm going to show you guys how I made one of the creatures from the movie CoCo. A little whiles back I got commissioned to do Pepita from the movie and I thought I'd share it with you guys. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, the first thing we're going to work on to make Pepita is going to be the pattern for the fabric and the sewing. So right now I have the main body piece and I have it separated into two colors. The top of Pepita is like this kind of blue speckly bit and then the rest of it is like green. I wanted to get the green to have a little bit of a speckly pattern as well, but they were all out of stock for that particular color, so I'm just going to be using the green. So the first sewing you're going to do with this is connect these two pieces together. And then right here I have the belly piece along with the inside parts of the legs. The inside parts of the back legs are going to stay green, but I'm going to have the front legs this red color. And then right here I have a strip of fabric to go down the back, and then these two pieces are for the wings. And then for the tail, it's going to be broken up into green and yellow stripes. So we need to sew all of these pieces together. So I'm going to sew these pieces together, but I'm not going to close the tail up yet because there's going to be some decorative felt pieces, and I want to work with those when I'm working with the wing pieces. So that way we're doing all the fabric first, and then we can move on to the felt. So back to the body, I have those two pieces connected, and now I'm going to sew the inside parts of the legs onto the leg parts on the main body. So I'm going to take the red pieces for the front and the green pieces for the back, and I'm only going to sew up the front half. I'm going to leave the back open, that way I can connect it to the wireframe a lot easier. For the back legs, I'm going to mark where I need to stop sewing, that way I have a nice opening for later when we connect the clay feet. Okay, now we just need to add everything to the belly piece, so we're going to sew these two sides onto each side of the belly piece, and then we can move on to making the feathers. For the wings, I'm making them out of layered felt, so I have a larger piece first, and then I'm going to put smaller wing pieces on the outside of this. That way it looks like you have layers of feathers. If you guys want to see in more detail how I draw out the shapes for the wings, I'll probably make another video soon kind of going more over that. I kind of did one like this before with dragon wings, and I think doing one for feathered typed wings would be a good idea. So right now I'm just using my E6000 glue and I'm gluing all these layers together. I have the wing broken up into two segments, that way when we fold it over so we can close the wings, there's kind of a joint there and we don't have to worry about bending the felt too much. Plus, the sheets of felt only come by 8 by 10, so I have to work with how large the felt is, so it's just kind of another excuse for breaking it up into two segments. After the glue has dried, I'm going to do a little bit of painting on the wings, so I'm going to take some orange acrylic paint and I'm going to paint some spots on the feather tips. I'm going to make sure to do this to both sides, but I'll have to wait until one side dries to be able to flip it over, otherwise I'm going to get paint all over the counter and I'll probably end up smearing what I did. After the paint on the feathers has dried, I'm going to move on to adding them to a wire frame. For the wire frame for the wings, it's just simply the measurement of the very top of the wing with a little bit of gap, and then you double that. That way you can have the wings connected on the same piece of wire. So I'm just going to take some hot glue and I'm going to push my wire into that glue and let that cool. I'm going to do this to all of the felt pieces, and once the glue has cooled, we're going to take those strips of fabric that I said were for the wings and we're going to use that to cover up the wire. With this fabric, I'm going to be using my E6000 to glue it on. So I'm going to set these aside to dry, and I'm going to work on a little bit of felt detail that we're going to add to the tail. So Pepita's tail has these little kind of feather protrusions sticking out on it, so I'm going to take a little bit of felt that I've cut out into kind of like a roundish shape because they're not really pointy, they're more of rounded off, and then I'm going to paint on some detail to them. We're going to let this dry and then we can sew it into place on the tail and close up the rest of the tail and stuff it. So right now we have majority of the sewing finished. I've got the main body almost done, I've got the wings finished, and I've got the tail. So now we can probably move on to making the clay pieces. For the clay, I'm going to be making a face, the front paws, and then the back bird feet. But before we start on all that, I need to start on Pepita's horns. That way we have them baked and we can put them into the clay for the face when we work on that. So for the horns, I have both of them connected. It's just a basic simple wire frame for them. I've got it slightly bent to get a nice curve, and I'm just going to be wrapping this in strips of tin foil until I like the thickness of it. After that, I'm going to start covering it up in clay strips, and then I'm going to start blending everything together to add some detail to it. The horns on Pepita are actually kind of more cartoonish, they're nice and smooth, so I'm not going to have to add a whole lot. I mainly just have to make sure everything is nice and smooth and flush. Once I'm happy with how the horns look, I'm going to put these in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably 20 to 25 minutes. I just want them hard enough that way I don't have to worry about messing them up when I add them to the face. And then while that's baking, we can start building up the clay for the face. So I'm going to be taking my little glass container, I'm going to flip it upside down, and then I'm going to put a lump of tin foil on for the base. And then I'm going to start covering that in a nice thick layer of clay. If you guys are curious on what type of clay I'm using original Sculpey clay. And then once I'm about halfway done with this, I'm going to be pushing the horns into the clay. I'm going to leave that wire piece connected to it so I can kind of use that to build up the base for the snout. So I'm going to cover the wire up a little bit more in some foil, and then I'm going to start covering this up in clay. I'm going to start shaping it until I got a basic kind of lion cat shape to it, and then we can start adding more details to it. Now I'm actually making the eyes for this quite large. If you're doing a more realistic cat, you would want them to be a lot smaller, but this is more of a cartoon type style, so I'm going to make them nice and wide. Once I'm finished with the eyes, I'm going to move on to making the nose and the lips. So I'm just kind of using my tools to get the shape of the nose pushed into the clay the way I want it. For the mouth, normally I like using a strip of clay to make the lips. I basically just push the strip of clay onto the face until I like the shape of it and I blend it in. But for this, I kind of had a little bit of extra clay built up on the face, so I'm going to take advantage of this and just use my tool to shape the lip and just kind of blend it into the face. At this point, I realized the face was a little too thin, so I started adding some clay to the cheekbones to get it more shaped where I could add some fur to it later. I'm also going to be adding some clay to the very top of the head to make the ears. And again, I don't want to add a whole lot of detail to Pepita's face because I don't want to make it look too realistic because it's not going to look like her. So I want to keep that same art style that's in the movie. So right now I think I'm good on the detail other than adding some fur texture. So I'm just going to go over majority of the face and add that to it. So I'm pretty much happy with her face right now, so I'm going to be putting it in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit and baking it for probably about 55 minutes. And then while that's baking, we can start working on her front paws. For her feet, I'm going to do a technique that I like doing whenever I'm making a creature that needs clay paw pads. And that's pretty much just laying out a nice strip of clay to use as a base, and then building up the paw pads and the little toe pads and stuff on that and shaping it. After I have the right shape done, I'm going to cut the extra clay off around it and smooth the edges. We're going to bake this for probably about 20 to 35 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. After it's cooled, we can start building up clay on the other side of the foot. So for her, I'm just going to be making her toes. So I'm just going to be adding clay to the tops of all the toe pads, and then I'm going to shape those, blend them, and then add some claws to the end of them. And then once I like the look of the very top of the feet, I'm going to put these in the oven again for probably about 45 minutes. Same temperature. Now her back feet are going to be a little bit more difficult because they are kind of a bird shape, so I'm going to have to make a wire frame for this. I kept it very simple. I'm going to leave them connected while I'm shaping them so it's easier to make them symmetrical, but afterwards I'm going to cut them apart so it's easier to paint them. So right now I have this basic shape, and I'm going to connect these other pieces of wire that I've bent for the other toes, and we're going to use a thinner wire to wrap everything together. So it already looks kind of like chicken feet right now. So what we're going to do first is we're going to add some clay to the tips of all these wires to make the claws. So I'm going to be baking these separate, and then we can start moving on to adding more clay detail to the feet itself. I'm doing this that way I don't bump the claws when we're working on the other parts of the feet, and I don't have to worry about messing anything up. And then after that's cooled, we can start working on the bottom of the feet. I'm going to work on the bottom feet first, bake it, and then we're going to work on the tops of the feet after that. That way, again, we don't have to worry about messing pieces up while we're working. So for the bottom of the feet, I'm just going to use some clay balls and some clay strips, and we're just going to lay them out and start blending everything together. The bottom of the feet you want kind of nice and flat, so you don't have to worry about adding detail or anything. This is just where it's going to stand on, so think of it more as a base. You mainly just want to get the shape correct. So again, popping this in the oven for probably another 20 minutes, and then we're going to work on the top of the feet. For the tops of the feet, you're kind of doing the same thing that you did with the bottoms of the feet, but you're going to have to make sure to blend them into the other parts of the clay. So So I like using a tool for this, and I just kind of scrape along the sides, and then I use my fingers to just kind of smooth everything together. So first you're going to just want to lay the clay down and get the correct shape, and then once you like the shape you can start adding some details to it. So for this, again, I'm not going to add a ton of details, so I'm just going to use my tools to make little marks to make it look more like bird feet. And then we're going to put these in the oven for a third and final time for probably about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. So that is pretty much all the clay pieces. We're going to get those baked, we're going to get them cooled, and then we're going to start on the painting. Okay, so for the painting, I think we're going to go kind of in a backwards pattern from how we did the sculpting. So I'm going to start with the bird feet, the paws, and then we're going to move on to the face. So for the back bird feet, they're going to be a nice orange color. You'll probably need to do a few layers of this because orange is one of those colors that's just kind of a little thin when you're working with paint. So I'm going to probably let one layer dry, do another one, let one layer dry kind of thing until I like the color of it. But once you like how the orange looks, you can move on to adding the detail to it. So I'm going to be using a little bit of yellow to add some highlights to the tops of the feet. And then the claws are going to be this nice little blue color that kind of matches the top fur on Pepita's back. Now for her front paw pads, we're going to start with green and we're going to blend it into a blue. So her body kind of starts at the very top as blue, blends to green, and then her paws blend back to blue again. So I'm going to start with the green and I'm going to put it around the base of all the toes, and then once that's dried we're going to add some blue to the very front of the feet and start blending it into the green. And then the claws on her front feet are actually the color of her lower body, so they're going to be a nice green kind of yellow color. And then lastly, the paw pads are the same color as the back feet, so they're going to be painted in orange. And for some reason, I must have not recorded this, but just imagine that I painted the bottoms of the feet orange. Anyways, let's move on to painting the face. This is the more fun part anyways. So for the face, you're going to start by primering the very front of the face yellow. You can probably paint the whole thing if you want, but you only really need the very front of it. And then all around the very sides of the face are going to be green, and you're going to want to blend this into the yellow. Her lips are going to be the same orange that we did the back feet and the paw pads that I forgot to show you. And then the very top of her forehead, we're going to want to add some blue to this because this is going to blend into the blue fur and not the green fur. So now we can pretty much add all the details to the front of the face. I'm going to wait until the face itself is done, and then we're going to move on to the horns. So that way I don't have to bump the horns because I'm kind of using them to hold the face right now. Okay, so I let the face dry a little bit, and now I'm going to move on to painting the horns. So we're going to start with a green color at the very tip of them, and then we're going to start painting the very base of them a blue color and blending everything together. So your goal with the horns is to have a nice dark blue at the base and have it fade to a lighter blue and then eventually turn into a green. Okay, so that's pretty much all the painting. I've got all the pieces done. I'm going to let everything dry, and then I'm going to apply a thin layer of resin over everything to help protect the paint. That way the piece can actually be handled and you don't have to worry about the paint chipping off so easily. So this is going to have to sit overnight, and then we can start putting the whole piece together. Okay, it's the following day and we can finally put Pepita all together. So right now I have a wire frame that I lightly made. I just used the same measurements that we used to make the pattern to make the wire frame. It's very simple. The only thing I really had to do with this one is I had to reinforce the wires for the neck and the front legs because her head is kind of heavy. I want to make a bunch more videos that go in more depth on certain details, so that's probably going to be one of them along with making those wings. So right now we need to add the fabric body onto the wire frame and then connect the clay pieces onto that wire frame. So I'm going to start with the paw pads first. I'm going to glue those into place, and then we're going to glue the fabric around the base of that. Now with a lot of my dolls, sometimes I don't make the correct measurements for adding the clay pieces, but usually what I do is I just kind of make a little bit of a fabric patch. So with the front legs, the fabric doesn't reach all the way around the base of the foot, so I'm going to add a triangle to the back of it and just sew that on, glue that around, and close up the leg. So it's just a really easy fix to fill that gap. Okay, the front legs are finished. Now we're going to move on to the back legs. So for the back legs, we're going to use that little bit of wire that's sticking out of our clay foot, and we're going to connect that to the wire of the leg. So we're just going to wrap this with a thinner wire, and then we can start gluing the fabric around the base of the foot. And then if you guys are curious on what types of glue I'm using to put this together, I'm using a little bit of hot glue to hold things in place, and then I'm using E6000 to connect everything. So after we have the fabric glued around the base of the back leg, we're just going to sew the back legs up and stuff them. Now we can add the tail to the piece, so I'm just going to slide it onto the wire that we have for it, and then we're going to sew it to the body. Moving on to adding the head, we're going to glue this to the wire for the neck, and then we're going to glue the fabric for the neck all the way around the base of the head. For the top of the head, we're going to use that one strip that I showed you a while back that's going to be going down the back of the piece. Next, we're going to take those wings that we made earlier and we're going to add them onto the body. So the wings are connected to the wire frame, and now we can just sew them into place. So I'm going to sew the fabric to the underside of the wing first, and then we're going to sew the fabric to the top of the wing next. And then we can stuff the rest of the body and close it up. The last thing I'll do is probably trim up the fur on the legs a little bit so they're not so shaggy and they have a bit of a better shape. But we're pretty much done right now. Okay guys, and that's how I made Pepita from CoCo. I had so much fun making her, and I can't wait to mail her off to her new owner. I think she's the most colorful thing I've probably made so far. Anyways guys, I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, leave me a like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!